A rubber ball the size of a human head is flying through the air in a stone court in the middle of the Yucatan jungle. Two teams of players are slamming it with their hips, their forearms wrapped in leather, their bodies covered in bruises that go down to the bone. The ball weighs 9 pounds. Getting hit in the ribs with it can stop a heart. Carved into the walls of the court are images of what happens to the losing team. In some versions of those carvings, what happens is decapitation. Entertainment has always been violent. That is not the surprise. The surprise is how organized the violence was, how entire civilizations built infrastructure around watching people suffer, and how the spectators treated it the same way a modern crowd treats a football game: snacks, team loyalty, stadium seating, and death. The Mesoamerican ball game is the oldest known team sport in human history. It was played continuously for over 3,000 years, from roughly 1400 BC to the Spanish conquest in the 16th century. Every major civilization in Central America played some version of it: the Olmecs, the Maya, the Aztecs, the Zapotecs. Courts have been found at over 1,500 archaeological sites. Some of them seat 40,000 spectators. The rules varied by era and region, but the core mechanics stayed the same: a solid rubber ball made from the sap of the Castilla elastica tree, vulcanized centuries before Charles Goodyear got credit for the process, had to be kept in play using hips, forearms, and thighs. No hands, no feet. The ball weighed between 6 and 9 pounds, and archaeological evidence shows players wore thick leather hip guards because a direct hit to unprotected flesh could cause internal bleeding. At the Great Ball Court at Chichen Itza, a stone ring is mounted on each wall, 27 feet above the playing surface. Getting a 9-pound ball through a vertical stone ring without using your hands while opponents try to stop you is not a game designed for casual recreation. The court itself is 545 feet long and 225 feet wide, the largest ever built. The playing field is longer than a modern American football field. The acoustics are engineered so that a whisper at one end can be heard clearly at the other, a detail that suggests the crowd's silence mattered at certain moments. The walls are covered in carved reliefs showing the game in progress, players lunging for the ball, spectators watching from raised platforms. The sacrificial element is the part that separates this from anything in the modern world. Some scholars believe the losers were killed. Others argue the winners were sacrificed because being chosen for death was the highest honor, a direct offering to the gods. Carved panels at several sites show players being decapitated with blood flowing from the neck in the shape of serpents. At El Tajín in Veracruz, a relief shows a player having his throat cut while another player holds his arms. Whether this happened after every game or only during major ritual events, the stone record is clear. This sport ended with someone's blood on the court. 1,500 years later, and 3,000 miles east, the entertainment had wheels. Roman chariot racing was not a sideshow. It was the center of Roman public life for over 700 years. The Circus Maximus in Rome held an estimated 250,000 spectators, more than any modern stadium on Earth. Races ran 12 laps around a central spine, with 4 horse teams cornering at full speed around stone turning posts that drivers called the shipwrecks, because that is what happened there. Drivers were usually slaves or freedmen. They wrapped the reins around their waists so they could lean into turns with their full body weight, which meant that in a crash, the horses dragged them across the track until someone cut the reins or they died. They carried small curved knives specifically for this purpose. Most drivers did not survive long enough to become famous. The ones who did became the highest paid athletes in Roman history. A charioteer named Gaius Apuleius Diocles retired at age 42 with career earnings equivalent to several $1 billion in modern currency. The highest paid athlete of all time In any sport, in any era, a charioteer named Scorpus won over 2,000 races before dying in a collision at approximately 27 years old. The poet Martial wrote his eulogy. Scorpus was a slave. The fans organized into factions identified by color: blues, greens, whites, and reds. These were not casual allegiances. They functioned as political parties, street gangs, and social clubs simultaneously. In 532 AD, the blues and greens in Constantinople united against Emperor Justinian in what became the Nika Riots. The violence lasted a week. Rioters burned half the city. When Justinian's generals finally put down the uprising, the death toll was approximately 30,000 people. The bloodiest riot in recorded history started because of chariot racing. The Romans looked at the carnage and decided it was not enough. They wanted ships. Naumachia staged naval battles were the most expensive and logistically insane spectacles in the ancient world. Julius Caesar inaugurated the concept in 46 BC by digging an artificial lake near the Tiber River, flooding it, and filling it with full-sized warships crewed by condemned prisoners and prisoners of war. The prisoners fought to the death. The audience watched from the banks. 2,000 combatants and 4,000 rowers participated in Caesar's first Naumachia. The body count was not recorded because no one considered it worth recording. Emperor Augustus staged 1 and 2 BC on an artificial lake that measured 1,200 by 1,800 feet, excavated entirely by hand by slaves over several months, 30 full-sized warships, and several thousand smaller vessels. The combatants represented the fleets of Athens and Persia, restaging the Battle of Salamis for an audience that wanted to see what an ancient sea battle actually looked like. Except this one used real weapons and real people who really died. Emperor Claudius staged the largest Naumachia ever recorded on Lake Fucino in 52 AD, a real lake, not an artificial one, surrounded by hillsides that formed a natural amphitheater for the spectators. 19,000 condemned men fought on full-scale warships, while the shores were lined with armed troops and mounted cavalry to prevent escape. Before the battle began, the prisoners saluted Claudius with the famous line, "We who are about to die salute you." Claudius waved them on. The water turned red. When it was over, the survivors were returned to prison. The lake was drained for farmland. Across medieval Europe, the arenas got smaller, but the cruelty stayed personal. Bear baiting was a spectator sport that ran from the 12th century through the 19th. The setup was simple. A bear was chained to a stake in the center of a circular pit. Dogs, usually mastiffs or bulldogs, bred specifically for jaw strength, were released into the pit in waves. The dogs attacked the bear. The bear fought back. The audience watched, placed bets, and drank. When a dog was killed or maimed, it was removed and replaced with a fresh one. When the bear was too injured to continue, the event ended. This was not an underground activity. It was royal entertainment. Henry VIII built a bear-baiting arena at Whitehall Palace and appointed a Master of the Bears as an official court position. Elizabeth I entertained foreign ambassadors with bear-baiting as a formal diplomatic event, on at least one occasion canceling a performance at the Globe Theatre so the crowd would attend the bear-baiting instead. The Bear Garden on the south bank of the Thames in London operated next door to Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, and on days when both venues were running, the bear baiting often drew the larger crowd. The bears themselves were valuable property. A good fighting bear had a name, a reputation, and a following. Parish records from the period show that dogs killed in the pits were sometimes buried with more ceremony than executed criminals. The sport only ended because Parliament banned it in 1835 under the Cruelty to Animals Act, not on moral grounds initially, but because reformers argued it encouraged gambling, drunkenness, and disorder among the working class. The welfare of the bears was the last reason anyone mentioned. a 9-pound rubber ball, and a stone court where the losers lost their heads, a chariot track where slaves died for the entertainment of 250,000 screaming Romans, an artificial lake filled with warships, and condemned men fighting until the water turned red, a chained bear torn apart by dogs while a queen watched from the royal box. Every civilization calls its entertainment civilized. None of them checks with the people in the arena. Subscribe and hit the bell. Next episode. A disease killed 300 million people. Then we erased it. Bare bones. Simple stories about the weirdest things that actually happened.